60 years ago, you'd say, what the heck are you talking about? And now we know a lot about DNA. We didn't know back then. So you would not put a body on a hunk of glass out in the open, an alien body. I can't believe any scientist, and I have plenty of disputes with scientists, would do that. So I'm glad I didn't go. There will be more discussion next week at the annual MUFON conference in Irvine, California. IME is going to be there showing UFOs on video, but there will also be a question that you guys all are interested in. If we get real evidence, what should we do about it? Can we learn anything from the Roswell slide business? You know, on how to handle it, how to deal with the public. And you realize we're dealing with the biggest question facing mankind. We will spend $1 trillion this year on things military. That means we don't like each other much on this planet. So how do we go from that to a planet where we all think of ourselves as Earthlings? That's not an easy problem. I don't think any of us have a solution for that. You guys in Brazil have put forth more than anybody. But you don't know how to answer that question, do you? So it's not a trivial question.
Next stand up in the air, please. I'm going to I know people who I don't know. Gentleman there with the black top on, or blue top on, with the hand up, yeah, with the multicoloured sunglasses, yeah. There you go, who's your question from?
It's for Stanton, please.
Stanton?
Again, sorry. It's just a quick question. With your meetings in the past with Bob Lazar, with the element that he suggested fueled the UFOs when he back engineered them back in '86, and the element was not developed, heard of. It's in 2012 they actually started to develop this element, which has since proved that it can be contributed towards this anti-gravity technology. Do you still believe that Bob Lazar's efforts and mentions regarding his working?
I believe he's a fraud, let's put it that way. Bob did not invent, predict, or have anything to do with our discoveries about element 115. We've been talking about trans-uranium elements for a very long time. It took a huge accelerator operating for weeks to produce 4 atoms of 115. There isn't much you can do with 4 atoms, incidentally. And the half-life is less than 2 minutes. Bob at one time had said that Los Alamos had 500 pounds of the stuff. There is no possible way you can collect 500 pounds of something that has a half-life of less than 2 minutes. So people have drawn the unfortunate connection that because he talked about element 115, he had something to do with discovering it, producing it, or anything. And remember, anybody who writes me on the internet, look up my website. You can ask me, I've written a paper, Fraud in Ufology, in which I talk about my findings about Bob and about Colonel Corso, both of whom have lied substantially. And I don't say that lightly. I spent a lot of time. And if you can't believe a guy who tells you something about himself about which he knows more than anybody, like what colleges he went to and stuff like that, then why should you believe him about anything else? It's a longer story, and ask me for a copy of the Lazar or the fraud article and I'll email it to you.
Next person? No, it's not going to be a researcher, Dave. Come on. No, as much as I want to. Sheridan. Runner? Quicker? Thank you. There he is. Well done.
Hello.
There you go. Who's your question for, Sharon?
Well, I think it's unfortunately Stanton again, unless anyone else feels they can contribute. As a propulsion physicist at some point, Stanton, the biggest problem that we come across whenever we talk about this subject is the immense distances involved, the Einstein limit on faster than light travel and so on. So how can anyone come any distance?
Well, I love the way people always say vast distances. And I have people tell me about, look how much energy it would take to get to Andromeda. I don't care about Andromeda. It's a galaxy over 2 million light years away. I care about the local neighborhood. There are about 2,000 stars within 50 light years of here, give or take. We're still discovering some. Okay, you cannot overcome those distances with a dumb old chemical rocket. However, I would point out nuclear fusion. Now, whether you realize it or not, fusion is the biggest source of energy in our entire universe. All the stars produce their energy by nuclear fusion. There are several different fusion reactions, but nuclear fusion. I was involved in a study of fusion for deep space propulsion way back in 1962. Air Force paid $9 million for that study. And it was done under the direction of the man who had headed the fusion work at Oak Ridge National Laboratory, John Luce, outstanding scientist. Brightest guy I ever worked for in my life. He had a high school diploma, 40 patents, and was always doing things that the PhD said couldn't be done. Remarkable man. Okay. With a fusion, an appropriate fusion system, I'm not saying this is the ultimate now, because we don't know what's going to be found 100 years or 1,000 years from now. But with a good fusion system, you can kick particles out the back end of a rocket that have 10 million times as much energy per particle as they can get in a dumb old chemical rocket. Not 10 million. And so I would suggest that there are a couple of things about fusion, incidentally. Not only all the energy produced per reaction, but the fact that you're using isotopes of hydrogen and helium, which fortunately are the two most abundant and two lightest elements in the universe. That's kind of handy. It's not like uranium, which is not so common and is one of the denser elements. So fusion, if we want to go, all it takes is dough. And that's an American phrase. Do they say dough in England for money? Okay. So I prefer fusion. I can think of other things beyond that, like when we subdivide quarks, but I don't know how to do that. I know about fusion. So that's my best choice at this point in time. Remember, we didn't discover fusion until 1938. And our first big fusion event was 1952. An H-bomb, 10 million tons of dynamite energy release. Big bomb in 44 was 10 tons of dynamite. And the Russians sent off one that's 50 million tons of TNT, which is a little scary when you think about it. It scares me anyway.
Right, next person, and because I want to be fair here, let's have a question for Stanton's just answered the last three. So has somebody got a question, name in the hands in the air for a question for one of the other speakers? Okay, the gentleman here. Running? Excellent, thank you. Who's your question for?
Question is for Richard.
Richard, there you
Hi, Richard. Andrew Parker recently made some comments about terrorism in this country and the government cracking down on critical thinkers and truth seekers. How do you see the future for this kind of thing?
How I see the future with regards to that issue is, well, David Cameron said that he wanted to criminalise anyone who questions the government line on 7/7. That's what he said. Yeah, so he's essentially called me a terrorist, right? Now, I wrote to him and I challenged him for a free and open debate on that. The Home Office wrote back to me and he can't give me a debate on it. Now, there's a vote coming up in Parliament where they're going to try and pass that law, and I think it's coming up in the next sitting of Parliament, which will probably be sometime in October, November. So if that law gets passed, then I would give them the power to have all of my 9/11 and 7 research removed from the internet immediately. Now, I don't want to doom and gloom, but in order to get that vote through the UK Parliament, they need another fake terror event. So Yeah. So it's not. If that happens and they get away with it, I'm going to be one angry person. But a lot of people, everyone who I've spoke to, who I've explained this to, has said to me, Richard, they would never get away with that. But I don't know. So this extremism, they call it, the Extremism Act, it's going through Parliament, keep your eye on it. Go to your MP and tell them it's all about suppressing people who ask awkward questions.
Thank you. Right, another question from one of our speakers, other than Stanton. All right, I'll come back to the side of the room. Any on this side? Okay, oh, you two. Oh, no, the gentleman there. Right, who's your question from?
Suzanne.
Suzanne, okay.
We just had Stanton's feelings on how far and how fast our current technology could move us in space. As a non-scientist, what are your feelings from the entities that you speak to as to how they move around space?
Well, they move vast distances, and a lot of people ask me, what is the propulsion? And I say, I actually don't know. Because what I find is that humans are taken on board craft for a variety of reasons. It's like you're categorized and you are compartmentalized. And my role is communication. It is not a scientific aspect. You'd probably need to talk to Rudy Schild, who assisted me with the book on that one. I know that I've been told they cover vast distances, and often they are in space for a very long time and actually don't necessarily have a home planet, that they travel between dimensions. And I think we're only just starting to discuss that in a scientific arena as well. So, you know, that's the best I can do on that. And I'm not a person who tries to say that they know something if they don't.
Thank you. Right, somebody on this side? Go on then, Ben. Go on. Excellent, well done.
I've got a question for AJ.
AJ?
I was very interested in your story of your visit to the Brazilian Ministry of Defence. It reminded me very much of what a former speaker at a previous conference in this series, called Pia Knudsen from Denmark, said, because she said that there's an organisation called SUFOI, which is nominally a UFO research group, but it consists mostly of what Stan would call the nasty, noisy negativists. And they have got into a contract with the Danish equivalent of your Ministry of Defence to jointly research UFO and handle UFO documents. And I was wondering, in Brazil, is there a similar civilian organisation that has an equally cosy relationship with the government? As a debunking organisation, I mean.
Yeah, there are skeptic small groups, but they don't stand for long, because the UFO movement in Brazil is very strong. We have the Brazilian UFO Magazine going on for 32 years. It's the long-lasting UFO magazine in circulation, uninterrupted, in the world. And it gathers a lot of people around. So we're pretty strong. So now and then we have some skeptics trying to diminish, to decrease the importance, to underestimate it. Yes. What we do is just break them. They break their arguments. And sometimes they're so naive. They're just guys who want to deny things, doesn't matter what, that they make the most silly mistakes. And we are very well prepared to go over them. And quite frankly, they don't have any at all influence over the government. Right now, if something happens in Brazil about UFOs, the press will come to us, will come to our group. Never to the skeptics, never. Because, thank you. I'll come to our group. Because we have showed a lot of work.
So they have us as references.
Okay, thank you. Right. Anybody on this side of the room with a question for one of the speakers? The lady there. Who's your question from?
My question is for Richard.
Right, Richard.
And it's a follow-up to the question the gentleman asked before. In regard to the repression laws that Cameron and people trying to implement for Gag and so on, would you think that would you have considered moving abroad to operate still? Because surely places like Brazil would be more tolerant, or other places, in an internet sense.
In an internet sense, well, I think even if you do that, they can block. If I was to host material in another country, we can still block it all in the UK. If they bring in that law. Well, perhaps. I mean, they actually there's an organisation. Actually, I'm not going to make that comment. I'm just going to make probably. Okay, I will. ADVOD. They call it ADVOD, where they have the power to do that now, to stop people. For example, certain channels across the world, you can't get them in the UK because ADVOD have blocked them. They're an arm of Ofcom. So they can be selective over which country you see things in. So if they were to bring that act in the UK, they could affect just the UK by censoring the internet. A bit like people say China do now. But once this act is passed, if they pass it, then they could do it in the UK. But it could mean, for example, let's say they did bring it in the UK, then I'd have to do public speaking in Ireland or in Europe. Now, I don't know whether they would bring the same legislation in the United States, but it's so draconian, it's unbelievable.
Thank you. Anybody on this side of the room? Question there from put down. Runner? Good, isn't it? Like the Olympics. Right, there you go. Who's your question for?
The question's for Suzanne.
Suzanne?
When you got to the end of your presentation, there was like 3 sections on what you was doing here. And then I'm doing that bit, and someone's going to do that bit. And it
Hold
looked
the
like...
mic a bit closer, I can't hear you.
Sorry. It looked like something what I've seen coming at the 23rd onwards of September this month. Some of the things I've watched on YouTube. I'm just wondering if it's that sort of thing, what you're saying.
Okay, I didn't actually get quite to the end of the speech. I ended it there because I knew I was right on time. So you're talking about coming events, is that what you're saying? Yes.
Things like WaveX.
Yeah. Okay, I've had quite a lot of information which I talk about in a book in the last 3 chapters, part 3 of the book about coming events. I don't like to be negative, or I don't like to be seen as being prophetic either, but I have been told certain things, and there's a lot to do with the earth changes. For example, on one occasion we were 250 humans were taken on board a craft in a lecture kind of situation, and there was an enormous screen up the front. There were humans present who were part of the chain of command, shall we say, so it was a greys and humans together. And I talk about that also in the book. And we were shown in super speed, starting slowly, so many seconds apart, tragic images, futuristic images. Now, don't ask me how they obtain futuristic images, but that's what we were seeing. And they got faster and faster and faster until they were a blur, but we were still absorbing all the information associated with them. So we weren't just seeing an image, we were absorbing a huge amount of other things, emotion and tragedy, etc. It was absolutely gut-wrenching and everybody was sobbing. At the end of it, one of the greys just sent out like a blanket of calm, and everyone calmed down, but still had it all in their mind. So I think that we are in for a lot of problems. They told me back in the 80s and 90s, told the groups of humans I was with about how the time would come when we would become borderless, and that there would be millions of people moving, looking for somewhere to go, traversing the planet, borderless countries, chaos, cities burning, explosions, wars. Is that what we're seeing now? This is exactly what we're seeing now. And we were basically told, when you see this, this is when it's really going to start revving up. It's been progressively increasing. Some scientists will say that the Earth changes are no different, they've just got more severe. But yes, severe weather and severe conditions, hunger and warfare and confusion and military coups, etc. I lost my train of thought there. So I don't actually foresee a great time ahead of us. I think we have to go through a gut-churning time on this planet before we actually come to our senses. And I almost feel at times that we are almost past the point of no return in terms of actually a big improvement. Although we have a terrific amount of modern technology and advances in medicine and all kinds of things, it's not always used to advantage. It's often used, money is the big factor, power is the big factor, control is the big factor. And really, in terms of humanity, we don't like each other very much a lot of the time. So I think that things will get worse before they get better. But I do hope they will get better, and certainly the indication from them is that it will get better. But they pointed out a time when all the aid agencies and all the Red Cross and all of those agencies that serve humanity will just not be able to cope anymore. Well, we're at that point now. They're not coping now. And so the Greys and other species have been putting a structure in place, taking people on board, training them, selecting people from communities who have no memory of being on board, but they are taken on and they are given training and instruction, people who will lead communities and help save lives and help direct people. And that will just come to the fore, it'll just be triggered by an incident, it'll come to the fore and people will take charge. So there are preparations being made, but it is largely up to us also to implement those preparations. And I speak to experiencers worldwide, and the one thing I'm hearing from them all at the moment is we're in a time of preparation now.
Thank you very much. Right, I'm going to take, because we, believe it or not, time has slowed so slowly today. We are now 3 minutes to 7. We've got a bit of packing up to do. So I'm going to go for another couple of questions, okay? Now, Debbie Caton hasn't had a question. Has anybody got a question for Debbie Caton?
I have.
Well, after that very dominant I have, I'll hand over to this gentleman. I know my place.
Okay, David, nice to hear from you again. We've met before in Pro. It's about the crop circles again. There's so much, it's a very pretty subject, there's so much mess out there, you tend to think it's all man-made jobs, and that a gut feeling is how I feel about it sometimes. But whenever I end up arguing this with people, there's two things I always bring up that have never been adequately answered. One of them you mentioned earlier, the effects of crop not being trampled down, but falling over towards the top of the stem, as shown in Richard's excellent DVD on the subject video. And I just wonder if you've got any thoughts about that and how that may be hoaxed. But the other thing I always bring up is the ghost images in crops coming on a second year and in the fallow fields during the winter time. Comments, please.
Yeah. I'm not aware of the crop circle you mentioned. Jody, somebody? Unless I misheard you, sorry.
No, I didn't mention the specific one. I just mentioned the DVD that you'd made with Richard, which showed the effect, like the grooves of a red one, just the way you described it.
Yeah.
He's asking you, is it possible that books you want to St. George for?
Oh, no way. No. Impossible. Because you're putting a plank or a roller, garden roller, sometimes it would just destroy the plant.
And the second part was the ghost images.
Yeah, well that is a true effect. So I've been in quite a few where the farm's cropped it off, you've just got the stubble, and you still get effects on my Geiger counter, not for ionising radiation, thank heavens, but there's some electromagnetic residue which was affecting my Geiger counter, and also when I'm dousing, you've still got the dousing result on the direction the remains of the stubble are there. And then the following year, when the farmer has ploughed the field and put a different crop in, which is what they do, he's very annoyed when he finds there's a ghost image of the previous crop circle that's been laid, often a planked one as well, that had the same effect from a real one, and that causes him more problem. And also people trampling into the formation. If the seed is set and the seed knocked off, the trample is in the ground, and then he gets a weed growing of the crop from the previous year, which costs him lots of money.
Okay, right.
May I say something about the book?
What?
Well, that's from Ireland.
All right, yeah.
Yeah.
Let me Right, you nearly fell off there. I nearly fell. Right, one of the original guests who was due to speak were Carl Nally and Dermot Butler. Now, for those of you who are not familiar, they're probably the best writers to come out of Ireland on UFOs, from two excellent books, States of Denial and UFOs Over Ireland, excellent books about Irish cases. So they do really diligent work. Unfortunately, they had to drop out, but they are now working on a third book, and they very kindly asked the Payton to write an introduction. So he just wants to say something about that, and they will be a future guest. So a quick couple of minutes on that.
Yeah, the book is all to do with the animal mutilation subject, a book which is close to my heart, and I was hoping to write myself some years ago. It's like Richard prompted me to get stuck in and do it, and never got around to doing it. So Carl and Dermot are two very solid investigators in Southern Ireland, and in 2006 at the Irish International Conference I mentioned to them a case in Northern Ireland where a farmer was getting constantly lambs and sheep attacked and tongues removed, or bits of the tongue, to a place called Feeney district near Cloudy, and this has happened for quite a few years, and they were all very distressed about it. It was getting nowhere with the authorities. So the nub of the book is centred on their numerous trips to that farm. So this chap has had animals lost, over 500 at the moment, for over 20 years. And the authorities are ducking and weaving, passing the ball between our DEFRA, their police DEFRA, the police, and even went to the Chief Constable of Northern Ireland, and it's a terrible situation. So they're doing their best to help the farmer and his family. But they've written a book about the whole scene worldwide, and it's a cracking read, and I was privileged to be asked to write the foreword, which I've just done. They're still looking for a publisher, which is not an easy subject to find someone to go to press. It's a risky financial thing, I guess. So hopefully it'll be out next year. And it's called Circles of Deceit. Nothing to do with crop circles. There is a subtitle which makes it clear it's not crop circles. So that will, in my book, having read the draft of course, will be a definitive book on the whole animal mutilation stuff. And I think Linda Moulton Howe will be a bit green when if she reads it. That's my opinion.
Right, I think I'm probably going to call it there. It's now 6-7 minutes past 7. We started at 10 past 10. Okay? I want you to put your hands together for these speakers. My wife has done a marvelous work. Right, I now want you to put your hands together for all the team of helpers, the tea, the people in the kitchen, the helpers, Colin, who's done an absolutely fantastic technical job. It's alleviated the pressure on me, because you don't have a conference if you don't have sound and vision. So that guy's an absolute dynamite. He's just volunteered from Norway, travelled down from Inverness. So a round of applause to him. I think this young lady here, Megan, the scourge of you will subscribe history. Basically, a round of applause to Megan for all our hard work. And of course, I have a lovely daughter at the background with her partner, James. Round of applause. And it kind of goes without saying that there's two more people at the back of the room. Tino, the big doorman, the nice smart guy there with the t-shirt. Lovely legs. And of course, one final person has to be Larry Warren, my co-host today. And of course, if I don't mention her, I'm going to get it in the neck. So my wife, Lily, is my rock. It's like watching seals. Right. I hope you've enjoyed today. How many people in the room are coming back tomorrow? Oh, that's excellent. That's brilliant. How many people are just Saturday only, but after today have thought, we've maybe got 10 tickets tomorrow available? Who wants to come back tomorrow who hasn't got a ticket? If there's anybody who wants to come, we've got about 10 tickets available. 5 tickets now down. So 275 people will turn up tomorrow. There are 5 tickets available. See Tino at the back if you want to pay him to secure those 5 tickets. Just believe me, if you don't grab them now and think, oh, I might go in the morning and see what's what, probably the first 5 people in the queue tomorrow who haven't been today will turn up and they'll get those tickets so you'll dip out. So if you wanted those 5 tickets, I suggest you see Tino before we leave. Right, now, you've got long distances to go, no doubt. A lot of you in hotels near here. Holmfirth, if you don't know it, is full of, if you're staying over, it's full of quaint little bars and restaurants. There's the Brambles, the Bridge, there's Italian restaurants, there's Indian, there's Chinese. For a little village, it's pretty much got everything. Alright? So it is a lovely place. Saturday night, it's going to be here in the Bridge, which is kind of where we centre and keep the speakers. Will probably be a real haven of UFO like-minded people tonight. The speakers and the helpers are going off for a bit of a meal that I put on to thank them. But no doubt a lot of us will end up in the Bridge later on for a drink. So if they're not too inebriated, and that's me, I mean the speakers, you can no doubt approach them.
Okay, this is for Stanton. I want to know where did the rumour come from that Carl Sagan was a later-day member of Majestic, and does that story have any credibility at all in your mind?
I don't know where the rumor came from. I did hear it recently. I don't know where it was in print. I saw Carl a year before he died. I visited Cornell to give a lecture, and I was taken to his house, and his wife and he and another professor. We had coffee and cake, and Carl and I talked, and we sent several letters back and forth after that. I was challenging him to a debate because of his article in that weekly supplement about abductions, and there were a lot of mistakes in it. And we had a good discussion, and I challenged him to a debate. Then I found out he had cancer. So that wasn't the time to make a fuss about a debate. He died a year later. We're the same age. We grew up in adjacent towns in New Jersey. We're in the same classes for 3 years in Chicago. We talked a bit about classified work. And basically, as happens when you talk with other people who've had clearances, you agree not to talk about classified work. I mean, it goes with the trade, so to speak. So I don't know where that rumor came from. There's a difference between, you know, the question was who succeeded Menzel, for example. And Carl had problems with the government many times. He was involved in protesting against nuclear this and the nuclear winter business and stuff like that. So whether he was really deep down involved, I don't know. And as a parallel example, I knew one of the astronauts before he was an astronaut. He was in the nuclear business as well. Met him at a conference. We were each chairing a session of the American Nuclear Society. And I asked him, Bill, I keep hearing about astronaut sightings. Do you know anything about them? Well, I don't think there were any sightings that remained unexplained. And he answered it in such a way that it seemed to me what he was saying was that's classified and I can't go into that. He didn't want to be unpleasant about it, but I understood it. I had a clearance, but I didn't have a need to know for what he knew, just as he didn't have a need to know for what I knew. And I found out more about the astronaut sightings from the Condon report after that. But there is this time of, I can't talk about it, and I know you know I can't talk about it, so we're not going to talk about it. It's like this business of some people saying all those guys would have told their wives what they did. It's simply not true. That's not the way the game is played. Maybe it is in England. I doubt it very much so. So Carl might have been a member of MJ12 partly because he said some foolish things, which as a scientist he should have known better than to say. To say there are interesting sightings that aren't reliable, reliable sightings that aren't interesting, and no interesting and reliable sightings, when the data shows exactly the opposite. Now, was that done intentionally, or was just he was too busy to do his homework? I don't know. And remember, Carl had some problems early on. He was teaching at Harvard, and he didn't get tenure. And there was a lot of discussion later, why didn't he get tenure? Because he ruffled some wings of people. So, who knows? He was admonished in a letter that I have seen from Menzel early on, in effect suggesting he was being too liberal in his views about some of this stuff. So, I don't know. I wish whoever is still part of MJ12 would send me the list of the latest 20 members. You know? I'd love to see it. But anybody who thinks governments can't keep secrets is wrong. I can guarantee you that, Gary. I think you can guarantee that.
Absolutely, yeah.
And
you wouldn't mess with anything.
No, and you saw the stuff that AJ got released, which I think is very important. There was one heck of a lot of stuff there. Much more than you thought was there, I think, at the beginning. So why Brazil is being more generous? They are not one of the world's, I shouldn't say this, but they're not one of the movers and shakers of the world. As far as I know, they don't have nuclear weapons.
We have our gun.
So I would like to know if Carl was a member. I would say this, there's a real research opportunity. A wealthy guy paid to have Carl's papers packaged and put at the National Archives. 700 boxes of stuff. And I haven't been there yet. And I'm anxious to spend some time there. I just saw Phil Klass's papers, and there isn't even a Friedman Klass file, even though we communicated for 20 years. So not all the stuff gets into the files, and so...
It's a bit like the Bollinger Memo, isn't it? Everything has a place.
So I wish I knew is the best I can say about Carl. It's a good question.
Thank you very much. And the next lady on the right there, God, that was up quick. Roman. Oh, he took his shoes off. I'm not sure that's worse or smelly feet or whatever. Right, who's your question for?
Stanton.
Stan?
Is it true that there's over 500,000 people on Mars?
Is it true that there are how many?
Over 500,000 people on Mars. According to Dr. Kilda, who was either killed or died naturally in February.
I'm not sure there's anybody on Mars. I keep hearing all kinds of stories. Project Serpo, we set up, there are colonies up there and all this sort of stuff. And I haven't seen evidence to support that. That doesn't mean I can prove there aren't, you know. But I have seen no evidence to support it. Evidence doesn't, do I need to tell you, evidence isn't the main tool of the people who tell far out stories, especially conspiracy stories. So, you know, it's nice to say that we've got a colony on Mars, and some people said Obama was sent off there and stayed there for a while years ago, and a whole bunch of other, you name them, somebody's been there, you know. Those are interesting stories, but I've seen no evidence to justify them.
Yeah, I just take on that from an evidential point of view. It's one thing to make a claim, but and I'm not saying that there isn't, and I'm sure Stan is saying, and he's got an open mind, like I've got an open mind, that we could have colonies on Mars, we could have a base on the moon. It would kind of make sense that we would have a base on the moon, because we haven't been there for so long, which I find very odd. But realistically, until enough people come out from the secret world and can prove who they are and what they were into the public world, which is this need to know crossover, we'll never know. Yeah, it's an interesting story, but there's no real corroboration from people who can give their credentials and said, I worked at Berkeley or whatever, and I'm this scientist, and you can do the timeline and check on them or whatever, and you can put the background pieces to their story. There are simply people making claims that may well be true, but you've got to err on the side of caution until you have corroborative evidence. And that's what I'm trying to say. The difference is it's a lot more simplistic, but if there's a UFO sighting involving, like in one case in Cumbria, 17 officers from about 7 different vantage points, it's pretty clear that there was something in the air, and then you have to determine what it is. So when you get that level of corroborative material proving that something happened, that's a big difference. When you see some statements and it's backed up and these people are who they said they were, that's a big difference. And unfortunately, with all those kind of stories, I'm not saying they don't exist, but until I see some compelling evidence, I would err on the side of caution and think it probably isn't true. But who knows?
Is this because it came from Dr. Kilda?
No, whoever made those claims, you know, I wouldn't say that, and I don't know what Stan would say, but it doesn't matter who says it.
Yeah.
Because the reality is, if you're going to say that, you really should be producing some kind of corroborative evidence that backs up what would be seen as probably an outrageous claim. Yeah?
Does Stanton know Dr. Kilda?
Sorry?
Does Stanton know of Dr. Kilda?
Runa Kilda?
No, Dr. Raina Kilda. She's from Finland.
Finland, who died earlier?
Yeah, in February.
Yes, I met the lady, actually, when I went to Bergen in Norway, and she had a remarkable career. Yes. But what I'm saying is, unless several people come out and tell the same story, who can provide the background data to corroborate each other's stories, unless you have that, because it's an amazing claim, you'd have to err on the side of caution. Otherwise, you know, Mickey Mouse lives behind that screen, and he's real. You know, there's a hell of a difference between illusion, real. I'm not saying it's not real, and I don't think any of the researchers would say the same, but I think because of who we are, what we're trying to stand up for, i.e. evidentially based, you know, I don't think AJ, I don't think Stan, I don't think Dave Hodry would say, yeah, we've got a colony on Mars, because, yeah, we haven't seen enough evidence to corroborate that kind of claim. Would that be fair comment? All right, next question. Thank you for the question. Any hands up in the air? That gentleman there, Sheridan.
You
You asked the question yesterday. It's dominating the floor. But you were the only one to have his hand up, so he deserves it. Right, who's
Right, well, I'd like you to indulge me because I'd like to ask a question. I'd like a very short answer from each member of the panel.
Okay, that's a good one.
There's a saying that Arthur C. Clarke once wrote that any sufficiently advanced technology will appear to the uninitiated like magic. Clearly we have a problem with that, with civilizations or technologies that may be many, many centuries ahead of us. Given where we are right now, what one piece of technological equipment or advancement would each of the panel like to have now in order to complete their missions?
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand what you're asking of me or the others.
I'm asking them, given that technology is advancing at such a fast pace and there are clearly technologies ahead of us, what one piece of advancements in technology right now would each panel find useful in their research?
Well, and obviously, I'll pass it along because that's the logical way to do it. From my point of view, I wish Dr. Roger Lear hadn't died because he was doing phenomenal work with implants. That was evidentially based all on video, x-rays, proving that those things were foreign objects, so producing so much physical evidence and data and compositions under electron microscopes that were very, very weird. And he died. And I could say the same about Lloyd Pye with the Star Trials School. I was fascinated by, me personally, by the DNA debate, and he seemed to be getting pretty close. He was waiting for technology to come up, and he died. But I felt the replica of the skull when he came over and did a lecture in Leeds, I think it was. And it was like enamel, it was like twice as light as a human skull, it was like enamel, the bone. And there were so many different things that made it odd, not least the fact that under microscope there were thin, red little spidery things that don't exist in bone at all. Now when you get those kind of physiological differences, that's scientific data that can be analysed. So for me, I wished that neither had died just when they did, and that we'd have got a breakthrough on DNA or something like that. Because I think we're quite close, and there are some strange things.
I'm with you. I am with you. I would give the same answer. What Roger was doing was impressive. He had taken like 17 implants. One of them, perhaps a couple of them, were analyzed in the University of Toronto. And it was discovered that that piece of thing was emitting a wave, a frequency. It was similar to a frequency that was being emitted by an object in the center of the galaxy, or something like that. That was told to me by Roger. What he was doing was very important work. And as Gary, I'm very sorry that he passed away. He was a very dear friend of mine, of us all. And he was doing something very important with very low, if any, funding at all. He was a man that he lived on the stretch, on the limit, and yet he made so much for so many people.
I guess what I'd like to see, the question, I hadn't thought of it that way before, but I feel that there are many people in England and the United States and in other countries who somehow feel that even though they may not be elected officials, they have the right to hold back information that is very important to our understanding of who we are and where we fit in the universe. And that bothers me. I understand security, and I think you need it for certain things. You don't want people to go in and pick up the plans for an A-bomb or steal away some U-235, or security is necessary. But who decided that the world should not be in on the secret, that there were loads of civilizations out there? I get irritated by all the, pretty soon, what was it, how many years, 2033, we're going to find life by 2033? why does the SETI community ignore the UFO data? I call SETI, S-E-T-I, silly effort to investigate. Because it's based on, don't bother me with the facts about visitors. Because after all, if aliens are coming here, who needs to listen for signals? Maybe you should learn sign language, you know. So equally silly and inappropriate as far as I'm concerned, is that there are people who decide that we can't let the public in on this. Or that there's a Russian billionaire that's donating $100 million over the next 10 years for SETI.
You could do what a difference to get the likes of us to do a coordinated get together. What we could do would to collectively try and challenge the mainstream. If somebody invested in why consider the better UFOs that.
And part of this is the failure of the press to do its job. There is a PhD thesis, it's depressing reading. The press, Dr. Herbert Sprintz got a PhD for looking at press coverage of UFOs, and he had scathing remarks to make about the failure of the press to do its job. And there again, I thought the press has a job of informing us what's going on. Well, not if it concerns UFOs. So these are the things that I would like to see changed. You know, where is there a drug you can give the editors to say, get your butt off the ground and let's get with it, you know?
Hello, everybody. As you know from this morning, my talk was on contact, and that's a particular interest of mine in the UFO field. So I'd probably have to give a contact-related answer to this. One of the problems that's often labelled at the contact field is if people all around the world are being taken by these beings, then where's all the photographic proof of this? Where is it? And people have tried to capture things on camera before with little to no success. And there's many different explanations and reasons behind that. Which range from the individual being in a different frame of mind while the experience is going on, so they don't automatically think, I'm going to pick up and take a photograph of the being that's in my room or anything like that. Most of the time it's a very weird shift in reality that tends to surround these experiences. There are a number of researchers who have tried setting cameras with certain cases, and the cameras have either gone off, ran out of batteries, that sort of thing. Some of you will be aware that I dealt with a case from Droitwich where a lady appeared to sort of dematerialise from a bed for a period of 16 minutes. If you haven't seen that video yet, it is on the BUFOG website with her case, and it may well be the real deal. I actually talked about it in a previous issue of UFO Truth Magazine. So in terms of new technology, some sort of monitoring, worldwide monitoring of contactees, which obviously would breach a lot of personal rules, and a lot of people wouldn't want to go with that. But something that could either track their position, so if they were being taken out of their beds physically or taken from their vehicles and actually sort of going up into the atmosphere or even out into space, you'd be able to track their position and you'd be able to see them actually leaving and coming back down. Or photographic monitoring of contactees. Obviously, I don't have anything like the amount of money that would be required to do that, to set up cameras. And to be fair, most contactees just want to get on with their lives and they don't want to set up camera equipment. And I do often ask contactees, especially repeat cases such as the one I talked about this morning, would you be happy to get an infrared camera set up? Because you might actually get some very interesting stuff on camera. But obviously, it's very personal to the individual, and they're trying to go about their life and live a normal life at the same time as have these experiences. Most contactees are not bothered with trying to capture the evidence that will prove to the world that their experiences are really going on, because they know personally that their experiences are real to them. So I think, in terms of the answer, it's kind of a bit of a convoluted answer there. No, that's a good one. Yeah, thank you.
I'm a farmer, he's on Woodstock. Anyway, I'm not a researcher like these esteemed gents, you know, and I'm, I guess, an advocate for witnesses, you know, and I mean not just Rendlesham, I mean anybody out there that's been through anything, that's what I'm about. that's fine, I'm happy with that role. Technology, chainsaw.
Nice one. Right, any other questions? This gentleman here, who was one of the four brave people from the stage, Masterman.
My question.
Who was your question to?
A general question.
Not a general question. Who was general who?
Generally to everyone.
Oh, right, okay.
Because you're talking a lot about evidence, and nobody here has seemed to mention the document on the NSA website that talks about an ET message. And I was wondering if any of you have come across this, and whether you actually have know the translation and what the message actually says.
I'm not sure I know what you're talking about.
There's a document which you can download from the NSA website, which basically is a message that was received by an American satellite, and it's the breakdown, it's the way they worked out what the message was trying to say. Now all the document does is it shows the methodology of the breakdown of how they turned the signal into mnemonics to translate digitally, and it does show the message. But I've never heard anybody else talking about it. Now the reason why I mention it is because it's on the NSA website. You can go to the NSA website with the link, download the PDF and see it, and it's basically titled ET message. Now, I don't understand why nobody else seems to be mentioning it and no research has gone into it, because as far as I'm concerned, this is the smoking gun. This is the Americans saying, here it is, here's the evidence, here's the document. You can't spoof NSA.gov. You know, it's coming from their servers. And anybody else know about it?
Are you saying you believe everything the NSA says?
No, I'm saying that the document is there and it's evidence for...
Is it genuine?
Yes.
Can I just say something about it? From what I know of it, it's talking about a training exercise that they this is how they would work out what an alien was saying. It doesn't actually say that they got a signal. It's more to work out.
If we were to get a signal.
Exactly. Yeah.
No, I disagree.
That's very different.
The document was forced. They were forced to release the document under a freedom of information request.
Yeah, but if you look at the way it's written, it's written as an exercise for working out how to decode messages from. You should have another look at it, because I'm sure that's what it is.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I am aware of something, but I've not seen the document. But I personally wouldn't trust the NSA as far as you can throw them, because they're one of the most secretive organisations in the world who have done their best to downplay and debunk this subject whilst being at the very heart of every major case. So there's a real contradiction in terms there. So is it disinformation? Is it a theoretical scenario? And it may well be that it was forced through a Freedom of Information Act to say, well, actually, we did do a theoretical exercise on what if. I don't know. Well, I think the answer is you send me an email with the link.
I'll send you the link.
And I will do a bit of research on it, and I'll send the link to all the other people, and we'll do our research on it. We'll come back with a kind of answer on that when we're better informed. Yeah? All right? So is that the way to deal with that one? So make sure you do that one. Right. Any other questions? Come on. And just before I ask Suzanne, come on now. Come on. Now, Susan Hanson. Seeing as Richard's off hunting again, I'll stand up. Ladies, thank you. Right, so this is obviously now general. We'll do a photo opportunity at the end because this is essentially all the speakers as well. However, more questions, hands up in the air. Lady there in red, quick as a flash. Who's the question for?
General, Does anyone...
Who is this bloody gentleman? Right, come on then.
For anyone that knows any information, Phil Schneider made a claim in the Disclosure Project in 2001 saying that he had been attacked by aliens at the Dulce base before his death. Does anyone know of him, of the evidence, or have spoken to him and think he's genuine, please?
I'm aware of the footage, I've seen the lecture, he makes claims that there's the underground alien connection, the deep flows at Dulce. A lot of people speculate there is a big underground base going down many floors. The question is there enough people, again, who can come out and corroborate Schneider's story? And for me, I don't think there is.
I don't either.
So that's the frustration. And again, I think we come back to the situation is all the people on this stage have got an open mind, but they needed to be persuaded through corroborative data. If 4 other people who worked down there, who all claimed to have seen the same thing that he saw, went on the record, you could validate who they were, where they worked, all their careers, and there was not cross-contamination, but collaborating together, that would be amazing. Because what you really do want in these kind of things is independent corroboration, i.e. you don't know the guy over there, but you more or less see the same thing and you give it an independent account.
That was one of the 20 in the Disclosure Project.
Yes, I know you. All right, I mean, I'm not judging him.
No, I'm not either.
But yes,
I was there.
again, if you think about that, I forgot about that, so that's a very good point. When we talk about attempts at disclosure, I don't necessarily agree with a lot that Stephen Gray has done.
Neither did we, by the way, that were there.
But, and I often kind of query if it was his idea, but the original idea, for me, the idea of getting high caliber witnesses together in one place was a brilliant idea. Unfortunately, I think he was probably flawed that some of the witnesses weren't as good as they could have been, hadn't been vetted as good as they could have been, blah, blah, blah. But I'd like to know where that original idea came from. I suspect it wasn't Stephen Gray's. But anyway, I don't know. But does anybody else want to say anything on that?
I would.
Yeah, go on.
Just on the Disclosure 2001, just a fact for you, and I met that guy, but the guys I hung out with, Stephen Greer put it on. Steve Bassett actually formulated the thing at the National Press Club. And just a little fact for you here. I mean, there were a lot of people. There was one individual who claimed he was involved with Bent Waters, was saying, I'm not going to say who it is, and because I don't do that to people. He was a nice guy, but talking about evidence here. And I spent a whole week. It wasn't just an up at the mic at the NPC. You've done it, Gary. I was in the first group ever to do it. And that conference, the one good thing about it in DC, that May of 2001, just a few months before September 11th, obviously, was, and I flew there from here, was that it was the largest in its history press attendance at the NPC, even with the president speaking at it. It broke records. It had 3 million people ready to log on the internet at that time, and the uplink was being run by CNN. It was jammed from within the Beltway for the first hour, so they lost 2.5 million people ready to log on. It was covered by every media from this planet for the full 4 hours. Members of the Republican National Committee who were next door, they came into the main press room where you were. And yes, we had some witnesses that had some amazing things, wild things to say or whatever. Some I didn't know. Phil I met, and I've known about the Dulce thing. It's a big thing that's been cooking stand, you know, the 90s, early 90s. The underground late 80s, it all got on into that. But in the end of the day, so talking about some questionable, there was one witness that claimed he wrote a document when in fact the man Dwayne Arneson, who worked for Boeing at that time but was a base commander, was the author of. That kind of popped his bubble at the event. But on the whole, it was the best civics lesson I've ever had, and indeed was the biggest press, even to this day, attendance. I don't think they've had any press come since. Tears in the eyes of those reporters, not one left. That we lobbied Congress and Senate all week. It wasn't just that. And it was so obviously squashed. So you just ticked me on that. Yeah, there were a few people I didn't know, but the Air Force guys, we stuck together. And Steve Greer, flexing his muscles, banging plates, demanding our attention, didn't get him far. We weren't there for his agenda. We were there to get disclosure. Thanks.
Good answer. Yeah, an excellent answer there, and an amazing anecdote coming out there. And one of the things I love about these kind of conferences is like Stan talking about the paradox and whatever, and he knew a little anecdote which is priceless, because these people aren't going to be around forever. None of us are. And when we get these kind of, no, I didn't mean it. No, but what I'm saying is all the people on here have like 40 years of research, 30 odd years of research, 85 million years of research, 15 years of research. Okay. Yeah, he's not research, but he's he's a classic witness. But you see what I mean? There are so many things that are so wrong with the way this subject is reported, and all these people have done fantastic work, and it's just not recognised in the mainstream. Sooner or later something's got to change. Next question.
Can I just...
Oh, here we go. There we go. Yes, ma'am. Yes.
You talked about underground bases. Like many experiencers who can offer corroborative evidence, I have been to an underground base and an undersea base, and I write about it in my book. And although I have to say I have read the DOS material, and it sounds very sinister and quite creepy, I didn't experience anything like that. And the kind of descriptions that I can give are corroborated by people like Naira Isley in the States, who's a former military air traffic controller. So there are any amount of experiencers who can describe what it is like, what the areas are like, how they appear, and what happens there. So I can only assume, given the fact that there are so many corroborative stories amongst experiencers and abductees, that these things actually exist, and most people don't realise it.
No, thank you for that. That's an excellent answer from somebody who's an experiencer, and of course I'm not. We aren't, but that's a great answer. But from the ones who aren't experiencers, we haven't got that experience to have that reference from. But we have an open mind that's saying it could be, and you've got an experience who's saying it is. I certainly believe anything that Suzanne Hansen says. But there are enough people out there who make claims in general that are not corroborated, and that is the problem. Next question. Lady there on the front row in the red. Here good. We're going to keep this going for about another 10 minutes, and then we're going to have to wrap it, I'm afraid.
Hi there. I think this is for Dave, possibly Suzanne. Dave, speaking about Dave's experience, you were speaking about he had, was it several army personnel around his bed?
Yes.
Before he passed out?
Yes.
Well, I've experienced stuff like that, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
My question is this. Do you agree there's a very fine line between ascertaining whether the presences are extraterrestrial or coming from a human soul returning from the spirit realm?
From what I've seen, and I can only go on the cases that I've personally investigated, which is coming up to near 200 now. A lot of the time, the beings, especially the greys, will change their appearance to make themselves appear. It seems to be less threatening to the individual who's going through it. It can sometimes be a family member. It can sometimes be an animal. Many of you know the association with owls. There's a lot of contactees have reported seeing owls. In actual fact, I'm dealing with a case like that at the moment. And it's interesting that Dave had an interest in the army, in soldiers. Later on, did actually join the army for a period of time. And from that particular case, I certainly believe that that he was undergoing experiences, visitations, and that the beings may have been using that persona, appearing as that to him. It happened on many, many different occasions throughout 3 years of his life, 6 to 9. So if it happened just once, and but they came through from a solid wall, and there's many other contact experiences where beings, greys, sometimes Nordics, will walk in through solid doors or through solid walls. They will also take people through walls, straight up and through the ceiling. So they appear to defy normal physics and normal logic. So I personally believe that those are ET experiences. There are a number of my lab experiences I've read about, dealt with very, very few. A couple of people that I've spoken with have had experiences involving soldiers where they appear to be human, sometimes working alongside alien beings. I'm not saying that that's not possible, but it seems to be quite a rarity, especially across here in the UK. And over half my experiences that I've dealt with have been from the UK.
So it's very hard then to ascertain the difference between an extraterrestrial being at the end of your bed, around you, in your room, as opposed to a human spirit returning to you.
Yeah, I mean, if it's just looking like a figure, as in a solid figure, all you've got to go on is the experience, really, and what happens with it.
Yeah, you just go with the feeling. Is that really the common denominator, the feeling you get at the time?
Yeah, well, many people report having a kind of sense of, a sense that something is odd in the room. It can often occur before the experience begins. You have to be very, very careful with the contact experience. There are a lot of angles with it that do fit very closely with sleep paralysis and with hypnagogic experiences. And some researchers even believe they're to be one and the same. But there are lots of people who don't appear to be alien contactees, never seem to have been sort of taken aboard any craft or even seen any UFOs, but have had experiences that fit on some level with contact experiences. There's a lot of crossover. You've got to be very careful with it.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Suzanne. Oh yeah, sure.
I think what we're talking about here for a lot of people is actually discernment.
Right.
And I get a lot of people coming to me over the years who say, I think I've had contact with aliens, and they describe a scenario which to me is actually a spirit contact.
Yes.
A spirit has entered their room or whatever. And I think that there's people who want to have contact with aliens who misinterpret that. So there's this whole discernment thing going on here. The other string to my bow, which I mentioned in my speech yesterday, is that from the earliest memory I have had what you might call mediumship skills.
Yeah.
I don't call myself a mediumship because of the connotations it carries. It's not something I went to a weekend workshop to learn how to do. It's something that has been with me throughout my entire life. So I'm very familiar with the spirit world and communicating with spirits. So there's this discernment thing, and there's wishful thinking on the part of some people who would like to be a contactee or whatever, or they simply misinterpret it. In terms of the military involvement, there's the well-known case of Kelly Cahill in Australia, who had an experience on a road in a car with her family, where this craft came down and the people were sort of semi-paralysed through mind control, but they were taken on board this thing. But she distinctly recalls hearing American voices saying, "Shut that effing woman up," because she was screaming and kicking and carrying on. So there's a whole lot of muddy water going on here that I have sort of been involved in myself because of my own experiences. It's very difficult sometimes because you get labelled, this or that, because of the experiences and the stories and encounters of other people. You get tied to different brushes,
Yeah.
So I think that there's a great deal that will come out as time goes by, as the whole subject opens up, and this time of examination that the Greys have talked about comes where the whole contact field and the whole UFO field is examined by the general public, not just by the UFO fraternity worldwide. Then we're more likely in this depth of examination, which we haven't reached yet, to have many more answers and to be able to define things more clearly as we understand things better ourselves.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Excellent reply. Now, because it was such a detailed reply, that took us to nearly 7:15. Isn't it amazing how many people are here that were here yesterday? Put your hands up. A round of applause to yourself for sticking through it. We've pretty much done 18 hours in 2 days, and as I'm sure all the speakers will agree, they're like a bit like a Grand Prix race. We sit here at the beginning of the day at 10 o'clock like yesterday, and then it's go, and then boom. We're a bit like our husbands, really. It's already happened, and here we are, and it flies back like that. It's kind of weird for those here because you pull from different ways, but I always love the conference atmosphere, and it's what I particularly am trying to do is get like-minded people together. And people said to me, well, you could go maybe to bigger venues, and a few people have mentioned it today. Now, yes, I could maybe go and get a 500-seat venue. We are expanding, but it wouldn't be in Holmfirth, and it'd probably be in a location with no infrastructure around it, no cafes, no places where you could sit and talk with like-minded people. It'd be cold, so I'm reluctant to do that. So what I'm not going to tell you now is, unfortunately, it looks like the council are going to close this building. Seriously, in March, they won't take a rebooking after March of next year. There is some debate whether it will stay open or not, but from my point of view, with all the advertising over a long year, realistically, I needed to have a decision. Well, the decision is we are staying in Holmfirth. Okay, and next year it will be the, I think the second weekend of September. Not quite sure the date is off the top of my head, but it's not the third week like this one. It's the second weekend, so 10th or 11th, something like that. And the new venue, which may well be now the permanent venue, is the music venue, the Picture Drome, the old cinema, which is used for all the bands.